letters she never sent. She kept every letter, folded corners, faded ink, 81 years of them. When the war took him, she kept writing anyway. Each Thursday, one more envelope. Each word, a love he'd never read. Until one spring morning, she wrote her last. Wait for me, I'll wear blue. Hi everyone, welcome to the Pillow Files. Let's get started. Eleanor Whitmore's seaside cottage stood on a bluff overlooking the restless Atlantic, where the gulls' cries pierced the dawn like distant bells. Weathered clapboard siding, once a cheerful white, had faded to a salt-bleached grey. The windows rattled gently in the Atlantic breeze, and the front yard was a tangle of wild roses and lavender that grew in tangled profusion, tended only by the passing seasons. Here, 89 years old, and stooped with age, Eleanor woke each morning to the sound of waves crashing against the rocky shore. The ocean's roar was the loudest thing in her world. The phone rang so infrequently that the answering machine's beep startled her. Inside, her hands trembled wherever she turned. Her arthritic fingers could no longer grasp knitting needles, and her once steady script had fractured into shaky curves. The mail, delivered each afternoon by Birdie Kowalski, her neighbour across the lane, brought little besides coupons for denture cleaners and condolence cards for recent friends who had passed away. 3 sons and 4 daughters had given her 10 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. They had long since moved inland, to cities that bustled and hummed, leaving Eleanor to the sea's lonely vigil. Every Thursday, without fail, she climbed the narrow attic stairs in her bare feet, the woolen yoke of her nightgown brushing her calves. In the attic, dust motes swirled in the single bulb's yellow glow. There, on a battered shelf behind a row of battered trunks and a faded straw hat, sat a wooden box with letters and envelopes arranged in careful neatness. On the lid, in fading pencil, she had scrawled, TJ, 1943. Each week, she opened the box and returned to a time she had never relinquished, a time before loss had permanently altered the shape of her heart. She was 17 when she first saw Thomas James. It was the autumn of 1942, and the church social hall had been decorated with crepe paper streamers and hallucinatory balloons. The smell of boiled cabbage and fried donuts drifted through the air. In flickering fluorescent bulbs, young men in uniforms, cadets from the State College ROTC, swirled paper lanterns above their heads. Eleanor's white patent leather shoes, scuffed at the toes from Sunday school, glowed beneath her blue cotton dress, the skirt swaying around her calves as she stepped onto the linoleum floor. She knew, even as the Baptist bell rang 7 o'clock, that something beyond high school awaited her. She should have been hunched in a classroom, reciting Latin declensions as her best friend, Marjorie Callahan, took notes for them both. But this night felt different. The world was at war, and the prospect of young men leaving to fight loomed over every church dance. Eleanor felt the air quiver with possibility and dread. Thomas James was 19, home on leave from training camp. He wore an army green uniform that looked too new for his shoulders, but he learned to adjust its edges as he danced. A crooked smile curved his lips, revealing a dimple on his left cheek. When he laughed, always when he laughed, he sounded like a crooner, as if he had just stepped off a stage. Someone had insisted his voice reminded them of Sinatra, though off-key, and Thomas wore that comparison like a gaudy medal. They met by the punch bowl. He offered her a cup and introduced himself. Tommy James, might I have this dance? He held out a hand, brown and slender, calloused from chores on his father's farm, but gentle, like river stones worn smooth by currents. Eleanor took his hand, surprised to feel an instant connection. The band struck up a waltz, Moonlight Serenade, though out of tune from being played on a battered accordion. As they danced, they swayed in an intimate duet. The other couples blurred into a watercolor haze, pastels and dark suits mixing in the low light. They talked about nothing and everything. "Have you ever been to Paris?" Eleanor asked, feigning worldliness. Thomas grinned. "I hope to get there someday, once I'm done being a soldier." She nodded, trying to conceal her uncertainty. When he touched her hand, she felt warmth rising through her chest. They danced until their cheeks ached with smiles. Later that night, outside the rectory's back garden, he took her hand and led her beneath a canopy of oaks and magnolias. The moon cast silver shadows across the lawn. She smelled jasmine and tasting dew on her tongue. He leaned in, kissed her on the forehead, and whispered, "I'll write." She nodded, her heart soaring. He hovered, uncertain, then inched closer and kissed her again, a gentle, cautious kiss on her lips, still carrying the tremor of a soldier on the brink. Beneath the moon, they stood shivering, not from the cool breeze, but from something far deeper. He kept his promise. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived in a plain envelope, postmarked Fort Jackson, South Carolina. The words, written in neat script, made her heart leap. "My dearest Ellie, thank you for that dance. I'll never forget the way you looked in blue. I'm in basic training now, harder than anything I've ever done. But when I rest in the barracks at night, I hum our waltz in my head. I think about you and how you made me feel like summer after a cold winter. I'll write every week. Trust me." He signed his name, Thomas James, and she clutched the letter to her chest, a tangible piece of warmth. She carried it everywhere, tucked under her schoolbooks, hidden in her dresser drawer, nestled beside her pillow at night. She traced his script in the dim lamp, memorizing each slant and curve. Thereafter, every Thursday, a letter came. Not always on Thursday, but often. When he was sent overseas to England in early 1943, his letters carried more fervor. Sketches of the English countryside, of sheep grazing in green pastures, remarks about branding my boots with mud so I don't slip in the trenches, and the way I long for your blue dress under the moonlight. He told her about hearing the first bells of V-Day in a distant field hospital, his voice winking through the ink. He wrote of losing 2 fingers in Belgium. "But none of my optimism," he insisted, "because I have you to come home to." Eleanor saved every letter. She fashioned a wooden box in June 1943, blessed by her father, a small carpenter, designing it with a sliding top, carving TJ 1943 in her best penmanship. She lined it with sheet music from the school, band illustrated by her dreams, a waltz, a serenade, a lullaby, all folded and tucked in carefully. When a letter didn't arrive for 2 weeks, she panicked. Miss Heldon, her English teacher, saw her tears in class. "Eleanor, you look a shade worn. Everything all right?" Eleanor had nodded, voice too tight to admit the dread. When the envelope arrived at last, battered and creased, she wept into the creases of the paper. She read about his unit's advance through France, about the friends he'd lost, about missing her so much that he ached in his chest. She wrote a reply, nearly 10 pages long, telling him about picking violets in her grandmother's garden, about her mother's strawberry pie, about how she traced the treble clef backward on her wrist to remember him. She sealed it and tucked it away, to be saved for when he returned, until it didn't arrive. The months stretched into a season of missing letters. She wrote anyways. She opened each creaky attic door in her mind every day, reached for that familiar box. But no envelope arrived. She pressed her ear to the telephone, breath held, waiting for the operator to say, "Long-distance call for Miss Eleanor Whitmore." It never happened. Then, 6 months later, February of 1944, a cream-colored envelope, standard issue, embossed with the soldier's insignia, arrived. She saw Mr. Harper, the town postman, hand it to her at the doorstep. He tried to be gentle, but his uniformed presence felt like a blow. Eleanor closed the door, sank to the floor, tears pooling around her knees. Her father found her there, knees pressed to the linoleum, trembling. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Open it, Ellie." With shaking fingers, she slit the envelope, feeling as though she were tearing her own flesh. She unfolded the letter printed in plain block text. "Dear Miss Whitmore, we regret to inform you that Private Thomas James was killed in action on December 15th, 1943, near Bastogne, Belgium. He died of wounds sustained during enemy fire. He is buried with honor at the American Battlefield Cemetery in Henri-Chapelle. We extend our deepest condolences to you. Very respectfully, Colonel Richard S. Donovan, United States Army, Europe. She dropped the letter, collapsing in a heap of hopelessness. The engagement ring, simple gold band with a small sapphire, her mother had slipped onto her finger the day Thomas left for training, was still tucked in her apron pocket. She pressed her hand to her heart, feeling the weight of a future she would never know. Her father held her as she crumpled. She wept until her tears ran dry, until her heart pummeled so hard she thought it might stop. She never wore that ring again. She tacked the letter to her bedroom wall, above her bed, and it remained there, faded but unyielding. Always there, an uninvited sentinel. She tried. She really, truly tried to move forward. In 1945, when the war ended, she walked across the stage at Willowbrook Community College, having earned a teaching certificate in elementary education. Voices cheered. She sat beside her father in the front row, black cap perched at a jaunty angle on her head. She smiled, but it felt like someone else's expression. Afterward, she returned home with the scholarship money she'd been given, and she paid for dinner at a small roadside diner with her father. That June, under a sky swirling with fireworks celebrating peace, her father quietly announced, "You'll need a partner in life, Ellie. Sheffield, good man, wants to take you out." She forced a polite smile and nodded. Sheffield Dixon, a steady presence at the diner where her father served coffee, asked for her hand. They married in September, his big Italian family pressing homemade ravioli into her hands. They had 4 children, 2 sons, 2 daughters, baptized, beneath the same church steeple where she had once danced with Thomas. Carol, her first son, had Thomas's crooked smile. She was a good wife, a good mother. Her children called her Mom. No qualifiers. She attended parent-teacher nights at their schools, chaperoned dances. At night, she would sit on the porch swing with Sheffield, watching moonlight snake across the yard. They never spoke of Thomas James. The engagement ring stayed in an old velvet box tucked in the cedar chest at the foot of her bed. Black velvet, gold trim. Sometimes she would finger it, imagining Thomas's smile, but she would not speak his name. Years passed. Her children grew up and moved away. Sheffield passed away in 1992. He had a heart attack sorting mail at the post office. She buried him in a simple pine casket beside their family plot. She cried, but she did not collapse. She returned to her empty house, rotated his shirts in the closet, picked at his letters. Love notes penned in careful cursive. She read them, wept, then tacked them to her dresser mirror. Messages never meant for Thomas, but meant to keep Sheffield's memory alive. The role of widow settled around her as another layer of identity. Her children called on holidays, but seldom in between. They were busy, lawyers, doctors, travel nurses, with grandchildren who had never met Thomas James. Each time her phone rang, her heart leaped in hope until it was happy birthday or how are you, mother? She did not mind. She was grateful for the calls, even if they were generic. The house grew quieter. The sea breeze found its way in through cracks. Her hands trembled more. She dusted the shelves, knitted one scarf for each grandchild, and placed them in gift boxes each winter. But her knitting grew tangled, and now she simply wore a cardigan as she walked to the mailbox each morning. Far too cold now to leave the house. Then one spring afternoon, April 2025, she climbed the narrow attic stairs once more. The house smelled of cedar, dust, and faint traces of mothballs. She gasped at the sight of the wooden box, now more sun-washed than golden. Its lid was sagging slightly, the pencil inscription faint. TJ, 1943. Times had weathered the letters, but its meaning remained. She pulled a stool up, settled on it with a soft creak under her weight, and opened the box. Inside lay dozens of letters she had written, unsent, stacked in neat bundles, pale blue stationery with her neat handwriting, ink smudged from tears that refused to stop. Each letter began with, "Dearest Tommy," and ended with, "Love, Eleanor. I saw violets today and thought of you. Do you still whistle at dawn? I held Sheffield's hand today. He smelled of pine and coffee. I wonder what you would smell like. My granddaughter turned 7. She plays piano on the Say. Old keyboard. I wish you could have heard her for one moment. I picked a wedding dress today. I have to. She'll be having a wedding. And I'll dance across the floor, imagining you there in your uniform, all smiles and dimple." Each letter folded so precisely, she'd learned to crease paper like origami. Each envelope stamped, unopened, addressed to PFC Thomas James, KIA 12-1543. They accumulated over 8 decades, after Sheffield died, after her children married, after her grandchildren were born. She wrote whenever her heart felt full of memories or aching for unspoken words. Now she drew a single blank sheet from a box. New stationery, soft white with a floral border. Her fingers shook so badly she spilled ink droplets across the page. She placed her reading glasses on her nose, though her cataracts had clouded most vision away, leaned in, close, and began to write. Voice quivering. My dearest Tommy. 81 years have passed since I turned 18 and met you at that church dance. I've lived a full life. Marriage, children, grandchildren. Friends that rose and left like tides. I miss you still. I miss the way you laughed at my offbeat dancing. I miss your crooked grin when you gave me chocolate on Valentine's Day. I miss how you said, "I'll write," and never stopped until you couldn't anymore. Sheffield was a good man, and I loved him as deeply as I could. But you were my first love. You were the one who made my heart feel like it belonged somewhere. And so I kept writing when the letters never came. I wrote because I needed to tell you that. I survived. I told you about violets, about summer storms, about my children, and about the swell of pride when they took their first steps. You were there in every paragraph. Your voice was my compass. I'm 89 now, too old to hope I'll ever find my ring. In another life, we would have grown old together. White hair, bent backs, maybe still dancing in that waltz. But life took you away, and then life took so much else. So now I'm writing to tell you, I'm ready to join you. Wear blue, Tommy. Because blue was my wedding color at 23, and it was my bridesmaid dress at 27, and the dress I wore on our last anniversary when we never knew it would be the last. It's still my favorite color, the color of the sky over Normandy on D-Day, and the color of the forget-me-nots I planted in the garden where your parents live. In my heart, we'll always be dancing under the moonlight. Wait for me, my love. I'll be there soon. Forever, yours, Eleanor. She closed her eyes, pressing her palm to the letter as though she could feel his presence beyond the words. Tears welled, and she dabbed them away with a handkerchief she'd embroidered 70 years ago. She folded the letter, carefully, slid it into an envelope, and sealed it with a soft kiss. Then, she placed it on top of the stack in the wooden box. She straightened the lid and pressed her hand to it, imagining the letters enclosed. Echoes of past joys, griefs, and dreams. Thomas had always promised to write. She had promised to wait. Now this was her final letter. She took a moment to breathe in the dusty air, as if savoring every breath before letting go. That evening, as the Atlantic's waves hammered against the shore, Eleanor sat in her favorite armchair by the bay window, knitting needles retired on the table beside her. She sipped tea made from chamomile and lemon, scent mingling with salt and lavender. She watched the sky's pink hues turn to indigo. The gulls cried overhead, wings slicing the wind. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Tommy, I'm on my way. At midnight, she slept quietly. When the moon was high, she slipped away, as if carried by the tide, leaving her body behind, like a husk. The next morning, Birdie Kowalski found her in the chair, head bowed, a faint smile on her lips. In her hand, clenched softly, lay the engagement ring, gold band glinting in the early sun. No one could say for certain whether she passed from sleep or simply drifted out to where she belonged. The local coroner, wrinkled and gentle, pronounced life extinguished at 12:30, peacefully, in her own home. When the grandchildren arrived for the funeral, they sifted through her belongings. In the attic, they discovered the wooden box, rows of unopened letters, all addressed to PFC. Thomas James, KIA 12-15 Chud 43. The final envelope, postmarked April 3rd, 2025, bore no qualifier. They read her last words, tears falling onto the page, as an elderly son recited Chopin nocturnes softly in the chapel. The congregation gathered, neighbors, distant nieces, even a few classmates from Eleanor's high school, who remembered her bright smile at recitals, long ago. They carried the letters to the crematorium. 8 decades of hope, love, and sorrow in fragile paper. Each unfolded letter drifted in the silent chapel like autumn leaves. They read messages of violets, lullabies, and longing for the man who never returned. They felt the weight of a promise. Wait for me. I'll wear blue. Later, they scattered her ashes on the ocean's edge, the Atlantic that had lulled her to sleep each night. The waves carried her, whispering her name. At sunrise, a single forgotten envelope washed ashore, worn and waterlogged, addressed to Thomas James. A fisherman retrieved it, drying it in his coat pocket before returning it to the Whitmore family. They opened it one more time. I'll be there soon. Wait for me. I'll wear blue. In the bedroom of her seaside cottage, the widow's cedar chest stood open, a velvet box with the engagement ring gleaming in empty darkness. On the dresser lay the framed photograph from 1942. Eleanor in her blue dress, Thomas at her side. His left hand rested on her shoulder. Her smile was radiant, untouched by time. Beneath the photograph lay a single envelope, worn edges curling like petals. Her granddaughter, a violinist named Clara, knelt to place the final letter beneath the frame. She traced the words with her finger, reading softly. You reminded me that dignity isn't reserved for the wealthy. It's given by those who see you. Clara closed the envelope, kissed it, then tucked it behind the photograph's back. She straightened the frame, dusted fingerprints from its glass, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma." As she turned to leave, a shaft of morning light slanted through the window, illuminating the wedding ring on its velvet cushion. Bluish streaks of sunrise danced on the walls. Outside, a gull cried, announcing the day. The ocean heaved and rolled, a steady, enduring heartbeat for a love that had endured longer than any war, and in that echo of waves, you could almost hear Eleanor's voice. I'll wear blue. Love this story? Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories that reveal the quiet power of kindness. Don't forget to check out the video, currently on your screen. You won't want to miss what happens when a single moment changes everything. See you in the next one.